So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Desi from Clean Air Partnership, and I will be your host. Today's webinar will go as follows. I will start with Land Acknowledgement, and then Kevin Bien, who is the Operational Director at Clean Air Partnership, will present the MTO data and how you can access it, as well as opportunities for community-level comprehensive vehicle kilometers travel data. Then we'll have a Q&A, which will follow by a presentation from Deborah Herbert on implementing the Toronto Community EV strategies, and we'll have time for Q&A after that as well. And we're hoping to conclude with the roundtable where we're going to ask you actually to provide some of the updates in your municipality and how are the current community EV strategies efforts going on. Clean Air Partnership is a Toronto-based organization, and we acknowledge that the stolen land on which we operate is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Chippewas, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. At Clean Air Partnership, we recognize that Indigenous peoples are particularly vulnerable to climate change and will be disproportionately impacted by its effects. Through our work, we are committed to disrupting ongoing approaches to climate governance that reproduce settler-colonial relations and systematically exclude Indigenous peoples from policy making. In the next 1 minute, I wanted to share a short video about the Indigenous Peoples History Month.
Ani everyone, June is National Indigenous Peoples History Month, and what we know today is Canada. And while learning about the diverse histories and languages and cultures of Indigenous peoples should be a year-long commitment, June is an excellent month to check in with yourself and your learning journey. It's a great time to think about what new resources you want to explore that cover history, languages, culture, and the experiences of Indigenous peoples here in Canada. June is also an excellent month to try something new that you've never done before. Maybe you've never been to a traditional powwow. Maybe you've never spoken an Indigenous language. Well, get in the car, go to a traditional powwow, pick up a language book and teach yourself how to introduce yourself in an Indigenous language. I encourage you, take time to learn what you can about Indigenous peoples in a safe and ethical way. Turtle Island is a shared space. It's important that we get to know who cared for this land and how we can build relationships. Miigwech for watching.
Thank you for watching. Before I hand it over to Kevin, I wanted to remind you that we have the Climate Action Atlas that collects ambitious municipal mitigation projects. If you have any new project, please submit it on our website, and I'll provide a link shortly. And now, Kevin, you can give it away.
Thanks, Desi. And I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. Seeing that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks everyone for tuning in. So I'm just going to talk quite quickly, it'll be about 15 minutes or so, about a new service we're offering at Clean Air Partnership and some EV data that we're providing on our website. Basically, we've acquired MTO, quite a comprehensive MTO data set of every vehicle registration in Ontario from the years 2016 to 2020. So it's really large. There's a lot of cleaning we've done on it, and we're now able to produce VKT, vehicle kilometers traveled based inventories for any municipality in Ontario using that data. So while there's obviously many different ways one could go about creating your transportation inventory, and I know they all have their benefits, some of them have their different drawbacks. The VKT-based inventory is really accurate because we have an attribution of those kilometers to the place of residence of that vehicle, where for other transportation inventory mechanisms that we could use, we could just downscale from our national inventory, from our provincial inventory, so on, a little more crude. Could use fuel sales information, but a lot of that fuel is transient and might be just a vehicle stop very quickly in your municipality to fuel up before leaving. Could use survey information, which again has its own pros and cons. This is a nice robust data set. And when we roll it up, we do get a comprehensive provincial VKT-based data set. So in any given year for this data, there's about 12 million records. It includes all road-going vehicles. So we're getting freight here. And I know freight is a particular element within transportation that sometimes we struggle to quantify. So we're getting all commercial road-going vehicles. We're not getting farm or off-road vehicles in this data. We do have, I mean, it's quite detailed. If you recall, when you might fill out that vehicle registration form for the province, it gets into, it already has pre-populated quite a bit of detail about your vehicle and asks for a bunch more information. So we get make, model year, body type, number of axles, fuel type. So from this, you know, if we were to take, say, a provincial data set and just downscale it, we would lose all of this. So our true emissions from these that we can get from these data would be lost. And we can provide that at the lower tier, single tier, upper tier, or FSA level within the municipality, so you get a better sense of what's happening. We don't have more granular than FSA level, so they mask it, the ministry masks it to some degree. And so for every report into the ministry, when you register your vehicle, you know, there's an odometer reading, there's a reading date. So that data set, as I said, there's a lot of issues with that data when we receive it, mainly because it's self-reported is a key part of it, and also because no one's reporting in for the year January 1 to December 31. I mean, most people report in on the birthday year or something like that. Highly unlikely it's going to match nicely. So we have to do a lot of different data treatments to get it into a format that works. So key one would be, these are just some of the treatments we apply. There's a lot of incorrect vehicle classifications reported. Like someone might report their vehicle as a convertible, but what does that mean? It doesn't really mean anything. Or someone might just say truck, which could mean anything from a pickup truck all the way up to a heavy goods truck. So we go through the different makes, models, reclassify them appropriately into more manageable areas. There are a lot of conflicting odometer reading issues we come across. You know, an example there is where, for example, for the year 2000, your odometer reading is less than your 2019 reading. That's not possible. So we have to treat for all of these. Often there's no municipal name provided or no FSA provided. So we have no information. So we cannot include these in a VKT estimation at all. Not tons of those, but we'll show you some stats later on what we actually have. Sometimes there's no make or model provided, so we have no idea what this vehicle is. So instead, we have to classify these as missing vehicles and use municipal averages or FSA averages for vehicle types to include the fact that we know a vehicle exists, we know it has traveled a certain amount of kilometers, but we don't know what type of vehicle it is. So there's some averaging we have to do. Then there are the issues around vehicles not being registered every year. And so we treat these in 3 different ways. This is really common, right? Because if you think about when you submit your registration, you might submit for 2 years. You might own many vehicles and decide, for example, the pandemic year, I'm not putting that vehicle on the road this year, just leave it. So there's this happens quite often. So we're going to treat, or we do treat rather, in 3 different ways. And I'll just talk real quick about what those are. Missing values. So for the example here, you can see we have if you look at the bottom axis there, that's the year. So we have a vehicle registration in 2016, in 2017, we have one at some point in 2019 and at some point in 2020. So we need to figure out exactly what we're looking for the 2020 VKT in this. So we plot a line from 2019 to 2020, divide that line by the number of days in that registration period between those 2 periods, and then we can get the approximate 2020 values only. So we do this a lot for a lot of the majority of vehicles in that registration set. We have to treat this way. Second is an issue where we need an odometer reading for a year, but our odometer readings, we need a VKT for a year, but that year is not surrounded by odometer readings. So what we do in that situation is we take the prior year's readings. So you can see there, we've got one for 2017, 16, 17, 18. We want 2019 or 2020 in this example. So we just plot a line of best fit here. And, you know, because we have a data analyst who does all this, we're not going through this one by one. This is quite instant, done in R, the programming language. So that's how we do this. So this is generally done for roughly a quarter of vehicles in an inventory. And the final treatment we would do is where there's only a single reading. And where this would happen is for new vehicles. So if there's a vehicle, for example, in this one here, we know there's a vehicle registered in 2016. We have a 2017 reading. We have nothing else to go on. So we, again, just plot a linear line here to get us up to 2020. So this one's a little more crude because we've only one data point we're working with. But again, it's the best available data we have. And every year we get new information. This improves. So, just looking at what these treatments do look like. This is just an example for an FSA in the city of Toronto that has 13,600 and some vehicles reporting. For those, we have to re-estimate VKT for about 7.3% of them. There's about 7% with just missing readings. There's about 7% with no available readings at all. Then conflicting readings, we were lucky with this one, we didn't have any, which is great. With decreasing readings, this one's way higher than you would think, is 10%. And what's happening here is when people are filling out those forms that go to the ministry, they just have a guess. So in the prior year, they might have gone to the vehicle and actually turned it on and had a look at the kilometers on the vehicle, reported that in. This year, they're just saying, I think it's about 120, and they just send that in and they're wrong. And then what we do is, you see that second last line there, the number of vehicles with a daily VKT above 640 kilometers. That's a figure we've realized. If a daily VKT of 640 is not going to happen. So, you might have a day where you drive 640, but you're not doing it every day. So we just pull them out and call them errors. And also any vehicles with less than zero, we've removed. And some of the outputs that we get as a result of this is for any body type. So we classify body types into car, light truck, medium truck, heavy truck. I think that's it. Yeah, not applicable. So with not NAs, we cannot determine a body type. For each body type, we then have the associated fuel type. So the fuel types, you've got CNG, diesel, electric, gas, plug-in, and propane. Again, the fuel types actually self-reported. So we reclassified fuel types to get rid of dozens of fuel types that were reported. Some people were reporting for fuel type, for example, green vehicle, which isn't really accurate. The amount of inaccurate fuel types provided are quite high. So we have to go through every vehicle make and model and ensure they're correct. And a good example of that would be, say, someone who drives a regular Toyota Prius would call that an electric vehicle, and it's not. It's not even a plug-in hybrid vehicle unless it's a Prius Prime. It's just a gas vehicle. That's very efficient. So we reclassify in this way to get us a solid data set. And also, by doing this, we can truly look at the penetration of electric vehicles and then look at that at the FSA level. And then we're able to make decisions around provision of infrastructure, for example, public infrastructure, and so on. So for every body type, we get fuel type, vehicle count, a daily average VKT, total daily VKT, yearly, and a total yearly. So that's provided, yeah, for every vehicle classification. And because there's so many different vehicle classifications, as I was saying, some people might say pickup truck. We've reclassified those to follow the NRCan classification. So NRCan is quite a simple vehicle classification system. So we follow that and provide that data like this. And then when we take this data, we have VKT at this level. We can then use either different emission quantification methodologies or just protocols like PCP or whatever people are using to feed them into those different tools and get a much more accurate emissions figure and a much more accurate idea about what's truly on our roads. So when you see down into the heavy truck classification down here, then we're getting into freight, and I'll show you what that classification actually means later on. But as you can see, to get our total yearly freight VKT, very useful and sometimes a more elusive data set than we've had previously. And just some of the definitions we have. So again, following NRCan, car is less than 27, 22 kilos. Then we go to light truck, medium truck, heavy truck. We define the body type in certain ways, our fuel sources, and our ODO readings. Again, all of which can inform quite detailed transportation inventories. So we've done all the data processing on all this, so we're actually able to do inventories pretty cheaply and quickly for any municipalities who are interested. So I'm going to talk in 1 second just about some what we've done with that data just for electric vehicles. But I just wanted to pause quickly and see if there are any questions with regard to the VKT-based inventory so far.
And if you have a question, you can just unmute yourself. Or if not now, you can ask your question in the Q&A box or the chat.
So we'll just give another 30 seconds or so, Desi, if that's all right.
Yep.
And for anyone, by the way, who wants an example of what a final VKT-based inventory looks like, we do host one on our website, and I can send that to anyone who wants it after the presentation as well, just so you can see the type of information you get, the formats you'd receive it in. We do a nice, pretty PDF one as well as all of the Excel files. Yeah, able to do any formats you want. Okay, if there's no questions, I'll go on to just some updates on the EV stuff. So again, taking this data set, we looked at every vehicle that was classified in any municipality. We reclassified as needed anything with just a green vehicle into the appropriate categories, which we're defining as 3. So hybrid doesn't exist the way it used to. It's either plug-in hybrid, electric, or ICE, so internal combustion. Again, following the same sort of treatments as before, everything is reclassified into the correct make and model to get us the correct fuel types. And then we took that data and we looked at EV proliferation by CAC municipality. And we've also provided this as an Excel file for every municipality in Ontario. And that's provided on our website following that link. Desi will send you the presentation afterwards, or you can just go to our website, cleanairpartnership.org, have a look at the project section. It's the first projects listed there. So you can look for any municipality, wherever you are, at where your municipality is at. It's provided for both lower tier and upper tier municipalities. But for what I'm going to just talk about today quickly, we did look at, we had one of our data analysts here just produce some graphics on EV proliferation just for the Clean Air Council jurisdiction. So looking at, again, because our data set stops at 2020 right now, and we'll talk in a minute about future data acquisition, looking at growth from 2016 to 2020. Again, this is for everyone in the CAC. Obviously, we're starting off from a low baseline here. So 2016, we're just up at around, 6,000 vehicles or something like that. So it is quite exponential growth, but from that low baseline. So we're now up over 40,000 EVs. We're not talking about plugins here. This is just EVs. And then we've looked at registered electric vehicles per 1,000 population, again, in all regions. So that's still very low when we compare that to combustion engine vehicles per 1,000 population. So our penetration rates are really low. When we actually look at them by CAC member, and again, this is all provided in an Excel file for you. If you want some more detailed analysis for your own municipality at the FSA level or something like that, I'm going to provide my information afterwards. You can just flip me an email and we can pull something together for you. But as expected, the GTHA has more population, more vehicles. There's not a lot to really talk about in this particular slide. When we look at population, density. So now we're into EV registrations per kilometer squared. You can really see that we're following that our urban densities a lot more closely here, where there's more people, more vehicles. You know, if we had just regular vehicles per kilometer squared by CAC member, it would look pretty much the same as this, right? So it's not telling us a ton. Again, looking at per thousand population gets a little bit interesting here, because you can see we're moving a little bit outside the city of Toronto and more into even northern parts of York region, Halton and other areas where the registrations per thousand population are actually quite high. But vehicle registrations in the city of Toronto per thousand population are also quite low. So again, pulling apart the differences between combustion engine vehicles and EVs, it's not that informative, this sorts of graphics. Nonetheless, interesting to just see the numbers where they're at. When we look at growth rate, it gets more interesting here, because as you can see in the sort of bright red there, those growth rates are between like 823% and almost 1500%. Again, that's over that 5-year period from 2016 to 2020. And EV growth, I think the highest one in the whole CAC network was Cornwall, way out over in Eastern Ontario. But again, it was from a very low baseline. So we're not accounting for a low baseline here. Nonetheless, EV growth rates are at their highest in the outer municipalities as opposed to the central GTA regions. And in terms of raw numbers, we're just throwing this out for you. And again, it's in the Excel file. For this one, because there's a lot of lower tier municipalities, especially within Durham, York, we haven't included all those. So get them off the Excel file. Just for the sake of presentation, we just put these here to show you the numbers of vehicles registered, the numbers of plug-in hybrids and EVs, and then the percentage. So you can see there's nowhere really, I mean, the highest EV registration percentage is 0.6 in York region. More rural municipalities tending to have those lower percentages, as you might expect, given the VKT in those regions would typically be higher. So there's a few areas where we wanted to get a little bit of input from council members. So we haven't done a lot with this data yet. We've been mainly working on the inventory side of the data and not on the research side with regard to specific questions around EVs. So some of the research questions we would like to examine are VKT by fuel type. Like, what are the differences in VKT by fuel type? Getting into more detailed EV ownership examinations by FSA, for example, or by things like average trip length and so on. We would like to look at EV growth by vehicle price, which is something we could examine. And then looking at the relationships between, again, it's going to have to be at the FSA level, so there's always going to be a bit of masking, but looking at some of those relationships between demographic characteristics, income, whatever else we want to look at, and EV growth, which might, again, provide some of the detail needed to inform the policy background to allow for an approach perhaps to the province, for example, or another order of government to suggest the maintenance or creation in the provincial context of incentives, for example. And we'd love to hear suggestions from the CAC members about what you would like us to do with this data. We cannot give you the raw data, but we can perform analysis on the data for you. So because of the confidentiality agreements around the data, we can't just hand it over, but we can get right into it on your behalf. So we'd love to hear about what you think this data could inform in terms of specific research questions, and also around the validity of future year data acquisition. So we're a little concerned around 2021, 2022 for two main reasons. First of all, you may recall there was an announcement from the provincial government in 2021 that we were done with registering our vehicles. And so many people, I have a next door neighbor example, got caught with this last week. He didn't register his vehicle in 2 years. He got pulled over, didn't know he had to. So the number of records in that data set is way down. So we're going to have to think about how we treat this data. We're being told now, yes, you do have to register your vehicle. You just don't have to pay for the registration, but you must register every year. That message, I'm not sure that has filtered into society too well. And, you know, unfortunately, that's going to result in enforcement and policing to drive that message home. So there's going to be a fall off in vehicle registrations. So we have to think about statistically how we're going to deal with that. And also the COVID. Suppose thinking about how we were estimating vehicles previously, if we were to look at a vehicle that was purchased at the start of 2021 or the start of 2020, it would be very difficult for us to plot with any confidence what the current VKT for that vehicle might be from that single data point, because that data point is bound to be highly likely to be inaccurate. So we need to think about that, what we do with the data. There's obviously a bunch of COVID questions are interesting. I don't know how truly informative they're going to be with regard to future policy, but they'll certainly be interesting. From other sources, we know Google, for example, our emissions are right back to where they were. It might as well have not happened. But I would like to hear from CAC members perhaps on any particular issues you might raise around either the registration change or COVID and how you might think we should treat those. So I'll stop talking. But yeah, with regard to registration, future registration requirements of the data set and COVID, would be great to hear from everyone.
Thank you, Kevin. I'll just share my screen. Do you see? Right, you see Menti. And I did share a link so you can access Menti, but it's basically, that's what Kevin was saying, what research questions you would like to have answered if you have that data. And thank you for those of you who are already responding. Meanwhile, there are 2 questions in the Q&A box. So Kevin, I'm gonna start with that. Do you have any insights when 2021, 2022 data will be available?
2021 is actually available. 2022, I believe, is currently available also. It's about $7,000 to request the data. So whether you request 2021 on its own or both years, we pay the same amount. So we're not sure. We want to get the number of records in 2021 and 2022 before purchasing them. Because if the number of records is going to be way, way down, we're going to have to think about the utility of that data set at all. So yeah, they're available. And sorry, Desi, what was the other part of that question?
Oh, that's it. When it's available, the data.
Okay.
Okay. Then there's another question. Am I correct in understanding that the inventories are just looking at kilometers associated with vehicles that are registered within municipal boundaries, and that the VKT associated with incoming tourism is not included?
Correct. So it's, if I live in the city of Toronto, my vehicle's registered in the city of Toronto, and I put on 10,000 kilometers a year, 6,000 of which are not happening in the city of Toronto because I took a nice big Great Lakes road trip or whatever. All those kilometers are now attributed to the city of Toronto. So that is one potential limitation of the data, as in the emission was not emitted in the city of Toronto. But when we roll up that data, we do get a complete comprehensive picture, and it's really one of the few ways you can do it, because you're not going to capture it in the same way through fuel sales surveying or anything else. Surveying might give you more local, actual kilometers traveled locally information. So in the GTHA, we're lucky enough to have the Transportation Tomorrow survey, which gives us that sort of data. But yes, that is the correct interpretation. It does not account for tourism or anything else.
Thank you. I will stop for a little bit and see if someone wants to. Okay, yeah, Adam, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hey, first of all, thanks a lot for this presentation and walking us through all the stuff you had to do to this data to clean it up. Personally, on a personal note, I tried to register my license plate, and I'm still waiting for my sticker, and I don't even know how many months it's been. So thanks for the prompt on that one. I got to follow up. to see when I can slap it on my license plate. I did just want to stress the emphasis and importance on getting and staying on top of getting the most up-to-date data. Completely appreciate the stats you put on out in front of us, and just looking at where we were at in 2020 as Peel region, I think we had about 5,000 or 5,100 in that table you showed of BEVs and PHEVs. And I recently got the Q1 2023 data from the MTO on electric or zero emission vehicles, and we're now over 13,000. So it is growing very quickly. It's nice. You can pull that data in quarterly, and they're pretty recent for free from their website, and it splits it up in by the first 3 digits of the postal code and battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So that's a quick way to get it. And then just in terms of what kind of analysis I would really find fascinating is linking this to the availability of public chargers by FSA. And the federal government has a big spreadsheet. I don't know how up to date it is, but they try and keep tabs on what's out there, as well as like just to turn it into actionable information. It is keeping tabs on like number of electric vehicles and the ratios of public chargers that are available, whether they're level 2s or whether they're DC fast chargers. And I'm curious to know, because you've gotten the registrations year over year, are you able to kind of figure out, how many new vehicles were registered in any given year? And can we track on a neighborhood or scale, are we on track to hit the federal sales targets? I think it's, 60% by 2030 was one of them. I think there's an interim one for 2025 too. But that's just a question I have for you. But otherwise, it's great to see the amount of work that went into cleaning this stuff up, and definitely valuable information. So thank you.
No, thanks, Adam. And noted with regard to, we have a GIS analyst here, and I really want to get him in on these sorts of things and looking at buffering around charging stations and so on. And so those data sets around charging, I would love to get a comprehensive data set from, if it's the feds. Again, I would wonder how up to date that is, but we'll figure that out. With regard to your second question on, can we determine new vehicle sales and that? Yes, we can, because we get the initial registration year. So we know vehicle was first registered in X year, what type of vehicle it is. So with regard to the neighborhood, our neighborhood in this context is the first 3 digits of the postcode. Those are very large. And so that's the best we can do because of the privacy with the data, but we can do that for sure. Yeah. And yes, with regard to the MTO website, that is well worth noting for everyone here, as Adam noted, that they do provide good EV information for you on the website. What they don't provide is the comparison of how that's doing compared to all other vehicles being sold. Yes, we're selling X number of EVs. What are we selling in terms of ICE vehicles? So we would love that information to be on there too, and would love to talk to the ministry about that.
I'm just gonna wait for, we have time for one more question, if there is one.
And there's great stuff on the Menti here as well, Desi, I'm looking at, which we will certainly take note of.
For sure. Trevor, would you like to unmute?
Sure, I should be unmuted, am I?
Yes, good.
So I think this question comes up is, so there's a tremendous amount of funding for charging infrastructure. So I think, well, you mentioned lower tier municipalities, they're getting overwhelmed by charging infrastructure requests. However, when these requests end up in council, especially when it's leases on public lands, there's no data to inform to say such a municipality should have this much charging infrastructure in place, because there's no data to indicate how many vehicles or trends or anything like that. So you know, maybe the request is for 20 charging stations, but because people are very uncertain, they might only approve 5 because they don't know if we actually need the 20. And I think this data could probably help with that as the funding for charging infrastructure kind of increases. And then the second part to that as well is like, if you look at Muskoka, that has 25% second homeowners, mostly from the GTA. Like, I look at every 5th vehicle on the road and it's an EV, but that's not captured within the data because it obviously goes back to the primary residents, not their secondary residents.
Yes, you are correct. So that's a really interesting little project, though, you know, looking at the appropriate number of chargers per vehicle and accounting for the fact that we are not sedentary, we are on the move. And I've no idea if that work is being done by anyone, to be quite honest with you, Trevor. I would love to get into that, actually. And yes, you are also correct. You know, for the secondary home owner, they need to charge too. So while this data set's not going to inform directly those sorts of analyses, we will have to look at additional data sets to get into that. But they're really good research questions, and I'm glad you brought them up. So I've jotted those down, and we can certainly take them back to our own team and have a chat about them.
Thank you very much for answering questions, Kevin, for answering the questions. Kevin is going to stay. We're going to move to the presentation of Deborah. And then after that, if there are more questions towards Kevin, he can answer it as well. Meanwhile, I'm going to move also the Menti question to what are the updates on your municipal current EV strategies. While Deborah is presenting, you can, the Menti will be open and you'll be able to submit your questions that will inform us. This information is going to be shared afterwards with OCAC. And then if there is a need for convene a kind of like a meeting so we can discuss more sharings. This will inform if such a meeting is needed. So I'll be happy if you can answer the question. And now, Deborah, take it away.
Okay, I'm just going to share my PowerPoint. Desi and Gabby asked if I could give a brief update on implementation of Toronto's electric vehicle strategy. Just checking, are you seeing the
Yes.
presentation?
Yes.
Lost the word. So just really quickly, the city's electric vehicle strategy was approved by City Council in early 2020. It focuses on light duty vehicles and includes targets for the share of EVs in registered vehicles in Toronto, personal vehicles in Toronto, starting at 5% by 2025 and getting to 100% by 2050. And the strategy focuses on what the city can do to support EV uptake and specifies 10 actions and 4 areas of opportunity that I'll go over in the next slide. But since the EV strategy was adopted in early 2020, the city has approved a new target of getting to net zero by 2040, as well as a net zero strategy with interim goals for 2030, 2 of which are related to transportation. The first is that 75% of trips under 5 kilometers, school or work trips under 5 kilometers are walked, biked, or by transit, and 30% of all registered vehicles in Toronto will be electric by 2030. So that kind of updates the targets in the EV strategy as follows. So now our target again is 30% of all registered vehicles will be electric by 2030. And for, to get to net zero community-wide by 2040, we'll have to have a net zero transportation system as well. So as I mentioned, the EV strategy has actions across 4 different areas of opportunity, including charging availability, reducing the cost and improving the convenience of using EVs, education and advocacy, and capturing the economic benefits associated with this new technology. A very strong focus for us, for the city, in implementing this EV strategy has been on charging availability, since it's a necessary, pardon me, a necessary condition for EV uptake. So we have now EV ready or EV charging infrastructure requirements in the zoning bylaw and Toronto Green Standard for new buildings. The Atmospheric Fund, which is an agency of the city, has an EV station fund in which they distribute money from NRCan's ZVIT program to organizations that would like to install charging infrastructure in MURBs, commercial settings, municipal settings, and on street. We also offer, the city offers financing for building retrofits through two different programs. The Home Energy Loan Program provides financing for single-family homes, and the Energy Retrofit Loan Program provides financing for larger buildings. And EV charging infrastructure is an eligible measure under both programs. The city's also been deploying public charging stations at on-street parking spaces and in Green P off-street parking facilities. Currently, we have 47 on-street charging stations with the goal of getting to 150 plus by the end of 2024. And we have 108 level 2 and 9 fast chargers in Green P parking facilities, with a goal of getting to 500 plus by the end of 2024. And we're also rolling out a corporate charging network to support the city's fleet transition to zero emission vehicles. And where possible or feasible, those charging stations will be made available for employee or public charging. And just a word about what are the city's fleet targets are. Targets are to transition 20% of the fleet to zero emission vehicles by 2025, 50% by 2030, and get to net zero by 2040. And considering the city's fleet includes more than 10,000 vehicles and equipment across a wide range of vehicle types, it's you know, I think it's a very ambitious and laudable program. On the education and advocacy front, we had actually in partnership with Clean Air Partnership and Plug and Drive, and with funding from NRCan's Zero Emission Vehicle Awareness Initiative, we had an EV outreach initiative that concluded in March. It lasted a year and a quarter. And with the funding support and the partnership from CAP and Plug and Drive, we were able to do quite a few different activities to improve EV outreach, unfortunately coinciding with a shortage of EVs in dealerships. So that was a bit unfortunate, but still, I think quite a successful initiative. The other thing I'll note is that the city council has set a target or a goal that the vehicle for hire sector will get to net zero by 2030. And so in Toronto, the vehicle for hire sector includes taxis, limousines, and personal or private transportation companies like Uber and Lyft. And so the city convened a working group with stakeholders from that sector and other relevant stakeholders to talk about what would be needed to get there by 2030, and has also commissioned a team at U of T to do some emission quantification and modeling. And I believe that this is actually led by a different division at the city, Municipal Licensing and Standards, but I believe that there will be a report going to council with some recommendations about this target. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or contact me offline if you'd like to discuss any of this work. But I will just highlight some potential resources that I would be really happy to share with you if they'd be helpful. So around the EV infrastructure requirements for new building, we've actually commissioned, as part of the EV outreach initiative, we've commissioned Dunsky to develop a model bylaw and technical bulletin / guide that can be used by any Ontario municipality for implementing EV infrastructure requirements for new buildings. So we're just doing the final review on that. And so I'm happy to distribute that once it's ready, and CAP may want to distribute that more broadly as well. I'm happy to share the actual language in our requirements and the guide that we've developed to support the development industry in meeting our requirements. That guide is in 99% done. We just need a final review. So happy to share that as well. And then Dunsky's also developed a guide for development industry members and building owners on kind of managing this infrastructure. And again, 99% done, just requires additional review, and that'll be good for sharing. With respect to EV charging, one of the major activities for me and for Nina Popova, who's also on this call, is developing a public EV charging plan that is a quite granular look at what public charging infrastructure will be needed, when, where, what kind, how much of public charging would be needed across the city if the city was going to achieve our goals for EV uptake, and where are the potential sites where this infrastructure might be provided, and then finally all the different options for investing in and operating this infrastructure, including the role of the city in each. So I'd be happy to share the scope of work for that project and the methodology that's been used for making projections of demand. We're actually just in the midst of that project. We've commissioned AECOM Limited to develop the plan for us, and they are using their proprietary EV Ready model to do the demand projections, but we can't share the code or the nuts and bolts of that tool, obviously, because it's proprietary, but I can share the methodology that we've used. And then also happy, not so much me as TPA and Toronto Hydro and Transportation Services, share the city's experience with deploying on-street and off-street public charging, as well as fleet services experience with deploying fleet charging. Now, I'm speaking on their behalf, but I think they would be happy to share their experiences with other municipalities. And then for the EV Outreach Initiative, we commissioned a statistically reliable public survey with a panel of 1,000 people. And I'm happy to share the results of that survey. We also held an open survey of businesses and plug and drive surveyed car dealerships. And I'm happy to share the results of those surveys as well, although they're not as statistically reliable. And then finally, I'm happy to share the scopes of work that we developed for that public survey and for some animated and live action videos that we produced under the project. So here's my contact info. Please reach out if I can share anything or you have any questions. I'm always happy to collaborate and share anything I can.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for this presentation. I'm just clarifying for everyone. You can access it. I think Deborah asked they're gonna a bunch of the resources will be available very soon. I believe you'll be able to share it to us, and then will be distributed to all CAC members. first come first. First, we're gonna share with you the recording of this presentation and the slides, and then whenever the resources are ready, then we're gonna send another email. Now I'm gonna just stop a little bit for to see if there is someone that wants to ask a question verbally. And Deborah, if it's okay, I'm just gonna move the slides back to the main T. And I want also to remind you that if you have remaining questions to Kevin, he's here as well that you can answer. Meanwhile, I will also ask you to provide your updates for EV strategies and where you can see where may you need help. I guess that's and if a meeting that is specifically on the topic of EV strategies will be of interest to you. Thank you for Richmond. Yeah, Richmond Hill. Thank you for providing the update. So the new capital budget to request for 2024 to begin development of a comprehensive electric mobility strategy. Thank you. I'm not sure who is the first answer. If anyone can raise a hand and just let me know so we can tag this. Trevor. Sorry, and which municipality are you, Trevor? Sorry about that. You can type it in the chat.
What was the question? Sorry.
Oh, did you wanted to ask a question, or my question was like who submitted this first answer here, that leasing agreement for charging infrastructure is happening right now in the municipality?
Yeah, that's right. So that's currently our strategy. It's just a case-by-case scenario, and the LDC is taking kind of the point on it.
Right. And sorry, with which municipality are you?
Town of Huntsville.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Here, can I ask maybe Victor? Victor Copetti, are you here? Can you provide a little bit of update on Durham region?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm no longer working for Durham region. I'm not working for the municipality anymore, so I don't really have an update for them.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay.
Okay.
I need to update my information. Then Kristen Bates. Oh, actually, you provided information for Richmond Hill, but I don't know if you want to jump in and provide a little bit more details.
Sure, Desi. Just quickly, what I've put there is pretty accurate to where we're at, but we have been trying to do some benchmarking of what other municipalities have done and included in their strategies. And so we're kind of in that process now where we're developing the scope of work and the terms of reference. Josh Ward from our transportation team is leading that. So yeah, a meeting to discuss any insights, especially when it comes to developing terms of reference or scope of work for these projects, would be really helpful from our end.
Right, thanks. That's great. And yeah, this is one of the questions that we can also discuss if a meeting is needed, but here maybe any of you can jump in and answer, do other people's EV strategies include micro e-mobility? And this is also a question that we've been discussing internally with CAP, that it should. Also, Deborah, maybe you can jump in and confirm that I believe it is part of the City of Toronto EV strategy.
No, it's not actually. The city's, yeah, the city's EV strategy does focus just on electric, basically passenger vehicles or light duty vehicles. But I can say that before I came to the City of Toronto, I worked at a small municipality on Vancouver Island, and I wrote an EV strategy or electric mobility strategy for that municipality, and it did include both EVs and electric micromobility. And one interesting thing I found when I was writing that that strategy was that the average trip in that municipality is basically the Victoria area. And if I remember correctly, the average vehicle trip was 6 kilometers, and the average e-bike trip, based on I think a wider BC analysis was 6 kilometers. So I thought that was really interesting, that kind of matching, and it suggested to me that there might be potential in that municipality for replacing car trips with e-bikes and maybe other forms of electric micromobility as well. And so I'll be interested to see what the Transportation Tomorrow survey results are around vehicle trips.
Yeah, that will be great. Is anyone else including micromobility at EV strategies? Would that be considered in Richmond Hill?
Yes, yeah, we were originally calling it EV strategy and then decided to broaden the scope to include micromobility.
That's great.
I'll also add from the Richmond Hill side something that we're looking to incorporate. I think it aligns with what Deborah was talking about in regards to the public EV charging plan. It sounds like we're trying to incorporate something similar into the scope of work for our electric mobility strategy as well. So like an analysis of locations and site-specific feasibility and that sort of thing. So we're expecting that it'll be fairly broad in scope or large in scope. But yeah, any insights in those regards from other municipalities would be welcome as well.
Thank you. Does anyone has some input or a question? We may need to look outside of the CAC to see what other examples are there for including e-mobility in electric strategies, or general in the EV strategies. So if you know for some examples, also please share it with us, and then we'll be happy to reach out and get more input from whatever municipality that it's outside of the CAC. And I see that we are actually up on time. So I will conclude this webinar, and I'm open for receiving more information on your updates, and also potentially having a meeting so we can discuss more the electric vehicle strategies. Nina, do you want to jump in? Or was that by mistake? I guess it was by mistake. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Deborah, for jumping in and presenting. Thanks for everyone who participated. We're here. Reach out to us. We will be sharing the recording, the presentations, and no additional resources with you by email by mid next week. And stay tuned for more of our work. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks, Desi. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.